There's something uniquely exhausting about getting pulled into arguments that never needed to happen. It starts with a word, a glance, a tone, and before you know it, you're in the middle of an emotional storm, raising your voice, defending your position, trying to prove a point that probably won't be heard anyway. You walk away feeling drained, heavy, wondering why it always seems to end the same way. Not with resolution, not with understanding, just silence and fatigue. And the older you get, the more you begin to ask yourself, was that really worth it? That's the thing about conflict. Most of the time, it doesn't resolve anything. It amplifies emotion, it magnifies ego, and it rarely brings us closer to the truth. And yet we keep falling into it, as if there's some invisible string pulling us toward every provocation. But what if the most powerful response wasn't a counterattack? What if the highest form of strength wasn't in proving you're right, but in not reacting at all? There's a hidden strength in walking away, not out of weakness, not because you've surrendered, but because you finally understand that your peace isn't up for negotiation. That's the shift. That's the moment things begin to change. Not when you win an argument, but when you no longer need to have one. The wisdom of ignoring is a deeply misunderstood power. It's not apathy, it's awareness. It's a conscious choice not to feed the fire when you know it'll only burn you. When someone lashes out, throws a cruel word your way, their goal isn't dialogue, it's reaction. And every time you give them that reaction, you're handing them your power like it's nothing. You're stepping off your path to play a game that was never worth playing. Imagine sailing peacefully, the wind steady, your direction clear. Then someone on shore throws a rock. You stop, pick it up, hurl it back. Another comes. You stop again. Before long, your journey has stalled, not because of storms, but because you couldn't resist engaging with every stone tossed your way. And the saddest part? The ones throwing the rocks often don't even remember the argument, but you do. You carry it, you replay it, you let it poison the rest of your day. Now ask yourself, how many times has this happened? How many times have you sacrificed your serenity just to prove something that, deep down, didn't matter? How many arguments have you walked into thinking they were about clarity, only to find they were about ego, yours and theirs? The truth is, we're not trained to ignore. We're trained to respond, to react. From childhood, we're told not to let anyone talk down to us, not to let anyone get away with disrespect. But no one teaches us when silence is the loudest answer. No one teaches us that refusing to engage isn't cowardice, it's maturity. And once you understand that, you begin to see provocation differently. You no longer take every comment personally. You begin to recognize when someone is projecting their own pain onto you. You stop mistaking volume for truth. You see clearly, this isn't about me. This is about something they haven't dealt with, and I don't have to make it mine. There's a Buddhist story, perhaps you've heard it, of a man who's insulted by another. He listens, says nothing, and walks away. A bystander asks, "Why didn't you respond?" The man replies, "If someone offers you a gift and you do not accept it, to whom does the gift belong?" That insult, that attack, it remains with the one who delivered it. You don't have to carry it. You don't have to unwrap it. You don't even have to acknowledge it. Let it fall to the ground like a stone that never found its target. But we're human. We're emotional. We react. We feel the sting of disrespect, and the ego flares up, demanding justice. It tells us, don't let them get away with it. You have to say something. But the truth is, most people aren't looking to understand you. They're looking to rattle you. And when you don't react, they lose that power. You shift the dynamic. You become the one in control, not of them, but of yourself. That's where real power lives, not in domination, not in outwitting someone in a heated exchange, but in knowing exactly when to stay silent and why. Because silence isn't emptiness, It's restraint. It's the space where wisdom breathes. Not every opinion needs your attention. Not every disagreement deserves your energy. When you argue with someone who isn't ready to listen, it's not a dialogue. It's an emotional tug of war. And every tug tightens the rope around your peace. But when you let go of the rope, something miraculous happens. The tension disappears, the noise quiets, and you're left with the one thing that truly matters: your own presence. This doesn't mean you'll never speak up. It means you'll choose when. You'll speak not from impulse, but from clarity. You'll no longer use your voice to defend your worth. It stands on its own. You'll no longer use your energy to convince someone who has no intention of understanding. You'll conserve it, protect it, spend it only where it cultivates something meaningful. You'll start to ask better questions before responding. Does this deserve my energy? Is this conversation grounded in respect? Will anything I say here lead to growth, or will it just pull me into an emotional spiral? The more you ask these questions, the less reactive you become. And the less reactive you are, the freer you feel. Because suddenly your peace is no longer fragile. It doesn't shatter every time someone disrespects you. It doesn't crumble when someone misunderstands you. It stands. Because you've built it from within. And from that inner stability, your whole life begins to shift. You start experiencing conversations instead of combat. You hear what people are saying without the need to counter it. You feel emotions without the urge to express them in ways that hurt you or others. You learn to breathe through the moment rather than burst inside of it. It's not indifference, it's wisdom. It's not detachment, it's discernment. It's the ability to see what's real and what's just noise. And in a world drowning in noise, choosing silence when it matters is the rarest kind of power. The older you get, the more you understand that your peace isn't something you can afford to spend recklessly. Not every conversation is worth having. Not every insult is worth catching. Not every disagreement deserves to make its way into your body, into your thoughts, into your nervous system. There comes a point where the preservation of your inner world becomes more valuable than the victory of an argument. Not because you no longer care, but because you finally know what actually matters. It's strange, isn't it? How we were taught that strength is in reaction, that courage is found in confrontation, that silence is weakness. But those who've sat through real storms, who've known the ache of wasted energy and the cost of emotional battles, they know better. They know there's a strength in stillness. There's a fire in walking away. Not the kind that burns out of anger, but the kind that glows from within. It's the fire of self-mastery. Letting people be wrong about you isn't surrender, it's sovereignty. When you reach a point where you no longer need to defend your name, your worth, your intentions, you're not bowing out of the battle. You're rising above it. You're saying, I don't need to be understood to know who I am. That kind of clarity, unshaken, unbothered, deeply rooted, is rare, but it's where real peace lives. You begin to move differently in the world. Conversations become lighter, not because they're shallow, but because you stop dragging your ego into every word. You listen more. You respond less. You're not silent because you have nothing to say. You're silent because you know not everything needs to be said. You've felt the cost of too many spoken words. You've watched relationships fracture because someone couldn't let a comment slide. You've watched peace vanish because pride got too loud. So now you choose. And that's the key. It's a choice. You choose where to place your energy. You choose when to engage and when to let it float by, like a leaf in the river. You begin to see your time, your attention, your presence as sacred. And with that sacredness comes discernment. The ability to ask, is this mine to carry? And to walk away when the answer is no. You learn to sit in the discomfort of being misunderstood. It's not easy at first. Every part of you wants to jump in, correct the narrative, defend your truth. But over time, you realize something essential. People will see what they are willing to see. Their view of you is filtered through their wounds, their fears, their experiences. And no matter how much you explain, if their heart isn't open, your words won't land. Not really. And so you stop performing, you stop defending, you stop draining yourself in the pursuit of being seen correctly. Because being seen is not always in your control, but being true, that's always yours. And the more you stay true, the less you need the validation. You become okay with silence, okay with someone not liking you, okay with walking away from conversations where your energy is not respected. It's a strange freedom, this kind of detachment. You still care, deeply. You care about connection, about authenticity, about integrity, but you no longer care to win. You no longer care to be right at the cost of your peace. You realize that peace is not found in dominance. It's found in letting go. You start to become aware of what peace feels like, not as an abstract idea, but as a lived experience. It's in your body. It's the lightness in your chest when you don't reply to the comment that was baiting you. It's the steady rhythm of your breath when you choose silence instead of sarcasm. It's the way your day continues smoothly. Because you didn't let one rude message ruin your whole mood, you begin to understand the quiet power of restraint. Not everyone deserves access to your truth. Not every situation warrants your emotional investment. Sometimes the best thing you can do is nothing at all. To step back, to breathe, to allow time to reveal what urgency would have clouded. Because time, more than anything else, has a way of showing what matters, what lasts, what's real. You also begin to recognize the emotional traps disguised as conversation, the passive-aggressive remarks, the subtle digs, the questions that aren't really questions, but invitations to fight. And instead of walking in blindly, you pause. You ask yourself, what is this costing me? Not in pride, but in peace. Not in reputation, but in presence. Because the more you care about your presence, your ability to remain grounded, calm, aligned, the less willing you are to gamble with it. You stop throwing it away in the name of pride. You stop trading it for moments of temporary satisfaction. You start valuing it like the treasure it is. And yes, there will be times you slip. Times when someone presses the exact button you didn't know was still sensitive. You'll react. You'll feel your heart race. You'll hear your own voice rising. But even in those moments, you'll learn. You'll forgive yourself. And the next time, maybe you'll pause just a second longer. Maybe you'll catch yourself. Maybe you'll smile instead of snap. And those tiny shifts, that's the work. That's the practice. Because no one is perfect. This isn't about becoming some enlightened figure who never gets upset. It's about becoming someone who knows when the upset is costing too much. It's about becoming someone who chooses peace over pride over and over again until it becomes second nature. That's the path of wisdom, the path of maturity, the path of inner freedom. And the farther you walk it, the more you realize there is nothing weak about choosing silence. There is nothing passive about letting go. There is nothing boring about being grounded. It's in that groundedness that life begins to change. You change, not into someone else, but into someone more fully yourself. The version of you that doesn't need to react to everything. The version of you that knows what's sacred and protects it fiercely. The version of you that knows peace is not passive, it is powerful, and it's worth everything. Sometimes the most powerful growth in your life isn't seen by others. It doesn't come with applause or a big breakthrough moment. It happens quietly when you sit across from someone who once triggered you and you feel nothing but stillness. When you hear words that used to light a fire inside your chest, and now all you feel is calm. It's the internal shift that says, I'm no longer controlled by this. And in that stillness, in that lack of reaction, something becomes clear. you've taken your power back. You didn't do it by fighting. You didn't do it by explaining. You did it by removing the hook, because the truth is, nothing outside of you can disturb your peace unless there's a part of you still willing to be disturbed, still reactive, still tied to an outcome, still seeking approval. But once you begin letting it be, whatever it is, you stop giving life permission to throw you off course. There's a phrase that often comes to mind in these moments. You can't control the wind, but you can adjust the sails. Life, people, situations, they'll all bring wind. Some of it sharp, some of it warm, but the choice always is yours. Will you let it toss you into chaos, or will you use it to deepen your direction? This choice doesn't happen once, it happens every day, in every conversation, in every impulse to react, in every opportunity to choose your energy over someone else's. And choosing peace isn't always graceful. Sometimes it looks like biting your tongue so hard it hurts. Sometimes it looks like walking away when everything in you wants to stay and explain. Sometimes it looks like silence when you're burning with words. But even in those moments, you're creating space. Space between stimulus and response. Space between who you were and who you're becoming. In that space, something sacred happens. You begin to hear yourself. Not the conditioned self, the self that was taught to perform, to please, to protect, but the real self, the self that's steady, wise, quietly powerful. And that self doesn't argue to win. That self doesn't rush to be understood. That self knows that not everything deserves a response. You start seeing the cost of constant reaction, the way it eats at your clarity, the way it drains your spirit, the way it clutters your mind with regret and replays and mental rehearsals of what you should have said. And when you compare that cost to the price of letting it go, you realize peace is always the better investment. But we live in a world that glorifies the clapback, that rewards the sharp response, that praises those who never let anything slide. And yet behind closed doors, the most liberated people are often the quietest. Not because they don't have thoughts, but because they don't need to throw them into every fire. They've discovered that not every truth needs to be shared immediately, that not every offense needs a consequence, that sometimes the best response is a soft heart and a steady breath. Because not all battles are worth fighting, and not all truths are heard by those who aren't ready to listen. You begin to prioritize your own readiness. You stop rushing into conversation just because they're open. You stop defending your truth to people who have already decided who you are. You learn the difference between expressing and explaining. Expressing is for you. Explaining is for validation. And the more you express without needing to be understood, the freer you become. That freedom shows up in unexpected places, in the way your body relaxes when you choose not to engage, in the way you fall asleep easier because your mind isn't replaying the day's conflicts, in the way your spirit feels more open, more expansive, because you're not constantly carrying emotional debris. You begin to create peace, not just wait for it. You become intentional about who you let into your space, about how you respond to tension, about when you engage and when you bow out. It's not about being passive, it's about being precise, about knowing the value of your energy and refusing to waste it on anything that doesn't return it. Letting go becomes a daily practice, not a one-time event, but a continual releasing of what no longer serves. The need to be right, the need to be liked, the need to have the last word. You watch them float away like leaves on water, sometimes slowly, sometimes in bunches, and you don't chase them. You bless them for what they taught you, and you let them go. And with every release, you rise. Not in the way the world defines rising, not in status or success, but in stillness, in centeredness, in the deep, unshakable knowing that nothing outside of you determines your worth. You stop being thrown around by every opinion, every conflict, every misunderstanding. You root yourself in presence. You speak less, but with more intention. You respond less, but with more clarity. You feel more, but carry less. That's the paradox of peace. It doesn't numb you. It deepens you. It doesn't close your heart. It opens it. It doesn't make you weak. It makes you strong in ways most people will never understand. Because strength isn't in how loudly you speak. It's in how silently you walk away when something is no longer aligned. You don't need to announce your growth. It speaks for itself in your calm, in your patience, in the way you protect your peace like it's the most valuable thing you own, because it is. And the more you protect it, the more you realize that peace is not found in the absence of tension. It's found in your response to it, in your ability to sit with discomfort without letting it shape you, in your willingness to let go of what doesn't belong, not because you don't care, but because you care too much about your inner world to let anything disturb it. That's the work, and it's worth it. There's something deeply human about wanting to be heard, to be understood, to feel like your voice matters in a world that so often speaks over you. And yet, as you grow, as you shed the skin of your past reactions, you begin to realize that being heard is not always the goal. Sometimes the true act of power is choosing silence, not out of fear, not out of defeat, but out of wisdom that no amount of words will change what someone refuses to see. You reach a point where you no longer need to prove anything. Your truth becomes a quiet thing, a steady flame instead of a wildfire. It burns, yes, but not to consume, only to illuminate. And those who are meant to see it will see it without you needing to hold it up for display. That's what peace does. It replaces the urge to perform with the comfort of being. There's a liberation that comes when you stop chasing explanations, when you stop repeating yourself in hopes that someone will finally understand, when you stop exhausting your spirit in the name of proving you were never what they said you were. Because you know now, the people who truly see you never needed a monologue. They felt your heart in your silence. They saw your growth and your restraint. You start to realize that many arguments aren't really about understanding. They're about dominance, about control, about getting the last word, not getting to the truth. And the moment you stop needing to win those battles, you free yourself from 1,000 invisible prisons. The prison of being right, the prison of being liked, the prison of being constantly on guard, ready to defend your existence. Instead, you step into a new kind of space, one where your presence speaks louder than your defense, one where your peace becomes louder than your rebuttal, one where your absence from drama becomes your strongest statement. It's not that you're avoiding the hard conversations, it's that you know when they're no longer productive, you know when the well has run dry, and instead of digging further, you choose to walk away with your spirit intact. This is a kind of maturity that doesn't come easily. It's built through pain, through realizing how much energy you've wasted on people who were committed to misunderstanding you, through those sleepless nights, replaying conversations you wish you'd handled differently, through the emotional hangovers that follow every time you engage when you should have let it pass. But you forgive yourself. You forgive your younger self for not knowing better, for believing that your worth was tied to how well you could explain yourself, for thinking that silence meant weakness. Now you know better. Now you understand that your silence can hold more truth than 1,000 words, that it can speak on your behalf without needing to justify or defend. You begin to honor that silence, not just in conflict, but in daily life. You learn to pause before responding, to feel the breath instead of the impulse, to notice the tension in your body before it turns into words. You create space between stimulus and reaction, and in that space you find choice. You find that you don't have to enter every conversation that invites you. You don't have to prove your intelligence in every debate. You don't have to react to every dig, every dismissive comment, every veiled insult. You can choose to be still. And in that stillness, you keep your peace. And your peace, it becomes your compass. You follow that compass, even when others don't understand it, even when they call you cold, even when they accuse you of not caring, because you care deeply. You've just stopped letting your care be a currency that others can spend. You've stopped bleeding for people who hand you knives and call it honesty. You've stopped volunteering your peace for battles that don't feed your growth. And slowly, your world begins to change. You attract different conversations, different people, those who don't need chaos to connect, those who don't need conflict to feel alive, those who sit in silence with you and still feel the fullness of your presence. You begin to live in a quieter frequency, one where the energy is cleaner, the connections deeper, the moments softer. That quiet frequency becomes your home, not because you've escaped the noise, but because you've learned not to let it inside. You've built walls, not to keep people out, but to keep your peace in. You've become selective, not out of judgment, but out of preservation. And the more you protect that inner space, the more you realize just how rare and sacred it is. You begin to live with intention, with slowness, with the understanding that just because you can respond doesn't mean you should. That just because someone demands your attention doesn't mean they deserve it. You no longer live on emotional autopilot. You choose your responses, you choose your silence, you choose your presence, and in choosing, you reclaim your life. Not the life that was handed to you, not the one built on reaction, but the one you shape with your own hands, with your own breath, with your own truth. You no longer seek validation through resistance. You no longer seek power through volume. You no longer seek love through self-sacrifice. You just live fully, quietly, powerfully. There's a strange kind of clarity that comes when you've finally had enough. Not in the way that bitterness speaks, not loud, not angry, but soft, certain, final. It's the clarity that comes from choosing your own peace over the exhausting pattern of proving yourself. It's when you stop walking into battles hoping for mutual understanding, and instead start walking away because you've realized some people will only ever listen to respond, not to understand. You stop needing closure from conversations that were never open to begin with. You stop seeking fairness in people who measure everything through their own pain. You stop giving energy to cycles that only spin you further from your center. And when that shift happens, the air around you begins to feel different, lighter, still heavy with unspoken emotions perhaps, but no longer suffocating. You've begun to exhale. Letting go of arguments doesn't mean letting go of your voice. It means learning the value of when to use it. It means realizing your words carry weight, and not everyone is ready to carry them with you. There's no point in screaming truth into ears that have already decided what they want to believe. There's no point in reopening wounds for people who never noticed you were bleeding. Instead, you keep your truth close. You protect it not by shouting, but by embodying it. You begin to walk in your integrity so fully that no defense is necessary. It's in how you live, how you treat people, how you respond to conflict with calm instead of chaos, how you choose silence, not out of avoidance, but out of mastery. Because you've realized the real work isn't about changing others, it's about managing your own energy when others refuse to do their own work. And that's where true freedom begins. In the quiet places where you no longer argue with reality, where you no longer chase people to prove your intentions, where you no longer spiral in your own head about what they said or didn't say. You just live. You move forward. You let people think what they will, and you reserve your energy for those who meet you with presence instead of projection. That freedom shows up in the smallest ways. In the way your chest doesn't tighten when someone criticizes you. In the way you don't rehearse a comeback that you'll never use. in the way you go to sleep without carrying someone else's judgment into your dreams. This is what happens when you stop needing the world to agree with you. And in that space of quiet acceptance, something extraordinary unfolds. You begin to hear your own voice again, not the voice of your fear or your pride or your need to win, but the voice of your truth, the voice that doesn't argue but simply knows, the voice that says, I don't need them to get it, I get it, and that's enough. You start to recognize how much of your peace was tied to trying to control the uncontrollable. You begin to untangle yourself from that web. You stop trying to manage how others perceive you. You stop chasing closure from those who only ever gave you confusion. You stop watering relationships that left you thirsty. And when you stop, you begin to bloom. You find strength in your restraint, in the way you now sit through discomfort without reacting, in the way you let others be wrong about you without demanding correction, in the way you refuse to return fire when your silence speaks volumes. This isn't submission, it's sovereignty. There's a deep power in choosing to walk away, not as an escape, but as an affirmation that says, I trust myself enough not to stay where I'm not heard. That says I love myself enough not to fight for a connection that disrespects me. That says I value my energy too much to waste it convincing someone of my worth. And from that place, relationships start to shift. You stop clinging to people who need constant explanation. You stop holding space for those who drain you. You start surrounding yourself with those who see you, not just what you offer, but who you are. Who ask how you're doing and wait for the real answer. Who hear your silence and understand that something sacred is happening there. Who don't need a storm to notice you, but recognize your value in the calm. These are the people who don't just want your energy, but honor it. Who don't just invite you into their lives, but create space for you to breathe there. And those are the only people worth fighting for. Everyone else? You bless them, you release them, and you move on lighter than before. Because the truth is, the moment you stop arguing is the moment you start living, fully, freely, authentically. You no longer fear being misunderstood. You no longer seek to convert people to your perspective. You no longer measure the success of a conversation by whether or not you won. Now, success looks different. Success is keeping your peace, holding your ground, feeling your feet on the earth when someone tries to shake you, speaking only when your voice adds value, not noise. Walking away, not because you're weak, but because you're wise. And in that walk, there's dignity, there's grace, there's the quiet confidence of someone who has nothing to prove and everything to protect. Because your peace is no longer negotiable, your presence is no longer reactive, your energy is no longer free to those who can't handle it with care. That is your power now, not in loudness, not in dominance, but in presence, in poise, in the way you remain rooted in yourself when the world tries to uproot you. You are no longer here to argue. You are here to be. There's a rare kind of strength that doesn't look like what we've been taught. It doesn't sound like the loudest voice in the room or feel like the last word in a heated moment. It isn't about showing up ready to battle, armed with defenses and rehearsed comebacks. Real strength is quieter than that, softer. It's the strength to sit with your emotions without needing to offload them onto someone else. The strength to walk away from conflict without needing to carry bitterness. The strength to choose peace when your pride is begging for a fight. It's in these quiet choices where the deepest transformation happens. Not in front of an audience, not on social media, but in your own heart. In the moment when your chest tightens with anger or sadness or confusion, and instead of reacting, you breathe. You listen, not to the noise outside, but to the quiet wisdom within. And in that breath, you choose something different, something better. This is the work of letting go. It's not dramatic. It's not always obvious. It's 100 small decisions every single day. To pause, to not respond, to not explain yourself, to not step back into stories that drain you, to not hand over your energy to those who have shown they don't know what to do with it. You make those choices not to be right, not to prove anything, but because your peace matters more now. Your peace is sacred, and what a shift that is. To stop needing to defend your character, to stop feeling like you owe everyone an explanation, to stop apologizing for choosing silence over chaos. You begin to realize that not everyone will understand your silence, and that's okay. You didn't come here to be understood by everyone. You came here to live in alignment with your own soul. That alignment doesn't always make sense to others. It often looks like distance, like disinterest, like coldness. But you know better. You know it's the kind of warmth that doesn't burn out your spirit, the kind of love that starts with self, the kind of strength that's rooted, not reactive. And once you find that, you're not willing to trade it for anything, not even the fleeting satisfaction of a comeback or the illusion of winning a battle. You've begun to see how much you lose when you engage in every conflict. Time, clarity, energy, and none of those are renewable in the same way as your will to argue might be. Your time is limited. Your peace is precious. Your clarity is a gift. You don't waste them now. You guard them with the fierceness of someone who has spent too long giving away what should have been sacred. And this shift, it doesn't just change how you interact with others. It changes how you treat yourself. You stop being your own harshest critic. You stop replaying old mistakes like a punishment. You stop dragging yourself back into memories that only bring pain. Instead, you begin offering yourself the same grace you've learned to offer others. You hold space for your past without letting it define your present. You meet yourself where you are, not where you think you should be. And that meeting is what allows true healing to begin. Because healing isn't a straight line. It's not always visible. Sometimes it looks like going quiet, like choosing not to respond, like keeping your peace even when your heart is hurting. And that doesn't mean you're suppressing, it means you're honoring your energy, honoring your growth, honoring your choice to protect your peace instead of constantly putting it on the line. You begin to see that life isn't about reacting, it's about responding with thought, with care, with presence. And when you start living that way, everything slows down. The world doesn't stop being chaotic, but you stop being swept up in it. You become the calm within the storm, the stillness in the noise, the grounding force in a room full of people who are still trying to prove something. This stillness doesn't make you passive, it makes you intentional. You don't engage less because you care less. You engage less because you've learned to care better. Better for yourself, better for others. You no longer enter conversations trying to change someone's mind. You enter to understand, to connect, or not at all. You no longer respond just to be heard. You respond when it adds peace to the room, not tension. And yes, there will always be people who try to pull you back into the old patterns. People who poke at your calm, waiting for the storm. People who misunderstand your silence and assume it's weakness. But you'll know the truth. You'll know that silence can be the highest form of wisdom, that walking away can be the loudest form of love for yourself. You're not here to carry what doesn't belong to you. You're not here to fix every misunderstanding or to clarify every assumption. You're here to walk your path, to speak your truth when it's right, to keep your peace when it's needed, to move with intention instead of impulse. That's what maturity looks like. That's what freedom feels like. You don't need to convince anyone anymore. You don't need to defend the life you're building. You don't need to shrink your truth to fit into conversations that lack depth. You're not available for surface-level arguments. You're not here for emotional tug-of-wars. You're not giving energy to anything that doesn't elevate your spirit, because now you know what peace tastes like. And once you've tasted it, really tasted it, you don't go back. You don't trade it for attention, for validation, for control. You hold on to it, you protect it, you live in it, and you let it shape everything around you. When peace finally becomes your priority, you begin to realize how much noise you used to accept as normal. The buzzing urgency of always needing to explain, the heavy silence that followed every argument, the long hours you spent in your own head rewriting things you said, imagining how it could have gone differently. And somewhere in that realization, a quiet vow is made. You won't go back to that version of yourself, the one who confused emotional chaos with passion, who mistook tension for connection, who saw argument as the path to closeness. You've learned something deeper now, that true closeness doesn't come through conflict. It comes through safety, through presence, through the moments where words don't need to be defended, only shared, where you're not fighting to be heard, you're simply received. And when you experience that kind of connection, even once, you stop settling for anything less. You begin to honor the spaces between words. You start valuing the pause before the reply, the stillness before the decision, the breath before the boundary. These are the moments where you meet your truest self, not the one shaped by reaction, but the one rooted in clarity. You no longer need to chase connection through friction. You don't seek to be understood by people who only listen to respond. You no longer stay where your voice feels like an echo in a room too crowded with ego. And in that shift, a deeper kind of communication starts to emerge. One that's less about volume and more about depth. One that isn't concerned with being right, but with being real. You begin to say less but mean more. You stop offering your inner world to those who only know how to argue with it. You become selective with your truth, not because you're hiding it, but because you've learned that truth is sacred. It's not meant to be thrown into every conversation like currency. There's a grace in that, a grace in walking away mid-argument, not in silence, but in peace, a grace in knowing you could say something devastating and choosing not to, a grace in prioritizing the relationship over the ego, and sometimes in choosing yourself over the relationship when peace is no longer possible within it. You start to release the need to carry everything. You realize not every emotional weight is yours to hold. Not every unresolved issue needs your input. You are not responsible for everyone's healing. You are not the fixer of every miscommunication. And you no longer sacrifice your peace to keep someone else comfortable. This kind of letting go isn't about apathy. It's about emotional maturity. It's about understanding that your presence is valuable. And where it's not honored, it doesn't belong. You stop negotiating your boundaries. You stop offering clarity where confusion is weaponized. You stop stepping into fires that only ever leave you burned. And instead, you begin to build your life around softness, around quiet, around the kind of people who don't provoke you into explaining who you are, but simply see you. The kind of people who speak with kindness even when they're frustrated, who take space without abandoning, who know how to apologize, not to end an argument, but to begin healing. You start to build relationships on shared peace, not shared pain, on curiosity, not competition, on honesty, not performance. And in these spaces, you bloom. You become more yourself, more alive, more at ease, because you're no longer carrying the tension of always needing to be on guard, ready to defend your heart. You also begin to notice how much easier life flows when you stop resisting what is. You learn to move through discomfort without panic. You let people leave without begging them to stay. You allow silence to exist without rushing to fill it. You start to understand that not every ending is a loss. Sometimes it's an invitation, an opening, a redirection back to your own wholeness. And when someone tries to pull you into old patterns, into defensiveness, into over-explaining, into guilt, you pause, you breathe. You remember the vow you made to yourself. I won't abandon my peace for momentary validation. I won't give away my calm just to win a war that doesn't matter. You hold your ground, softly, without needing to raise your voice, without needing to make a scene. Your boundaries speak for you now. Your stillness becomes your message. Your peace becomes your protection. You don't need to engage to prove a point. You don't need to win an argument to know your worth. You don't need to explain your silence to those who only ever responded to your noise. You've evolved, you've shifted. You've learned the art of restraint. And that art, that sacred holding of your own energy, has become your sanctuary. It's a sanctuary you don't invite everyone into. Because not everyone knows how to treat peace gently. Some only come to poke at it, to test it,